We are recording.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Hopkinton School Board's public hearing that's been posted for today, which is Thursday, not Monday, Thursday, November the 19th. It's 5 o'clock. And with us this evening is Norm Gupel, Rob Nadeau, Andrea Folsom, myself, Jim O'Brien, and we're joined by Superintendent Steve Chamberlain and Michelle Clark, a business administrator. And so I'm going to open the public hearing that has been noticed, and I'll give a little bit of a setup to what the public hearing is, and then I'll turn it over to the superintendent to walk us through some items. So because of the COVID pandemic, the state has released a couple funding sources to the community through the CARES Act. And actually I looked up these acronyms because I wasn't even sure what they meant. So I thought I'd just share that. So the CARES Act is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. And as part of that, they had another fund, which is the Elementary and Secondary School Education Relief Fund. So that's what ESSER stands for. And so the town has received a couple payments from those funds. And so I think tonight we're going to explain how we receive those and how the district is allocating those funds accordingly. And so if there's members of the public who have questions, concerns, thoughts to share, this is the time to do so during the public hearing. So Steve, the superintendent, will give an explanation of those funds, and then we'll open it up to questions and comments from the public. So Steve, I'll hand it over to you.
Sure, and you stole my thunder with the CARES, the acronym. Good work. No, I'm just kidding. So no, thank you. So this is a public hearing about receiving unanticipated funds. And so we are just talking with the public about it. This would be very hard to think that there'd be feedback that we shouldn't accept these funds and go to the expenses that we've incurred. But sometimes sometimes you would not accept some funds. And then the board has to decide, like if there was a recurring payment with something like that. So they're unanticipated. So there's actually three types of funds. The first one, as Jim, you talked about the CARES ESSER, and that's $46,000. We have until September 30, and Michelle will virtually kick me if I mess this up, 2021. And it's very broad. It's expenses connected to what we've had to do because of the pandemic. And then there's the Supplemental Public School Response Fund. That's it's known out there as the $200 per child grant, and that's $191,000. And that has to be spent and implemented by December 30. Now, for the CARES grant, CARES ESSER grant, for example, we are conduits for other schools within our district. So there's a little bit of money that could be allocated to other schools in our district, like Beach Hill or like the Kentucook School. So we don't have exactly 46,000, but we have the vast majority of that. And so the CARES ESSER has to be spent by September 30, and the Supplemental Public School Response Fund has to be implemented by December 30. And since the very beginning of the pandemic, Michelle has been tracking expenses very specifically. And so she was ready and I'll share my screen and show you just a list, and it's in the support materials. And the support materials for the meeting is a list of expenses. So originally, we allocated funds for the 46,000, and then we were directed by the DOE to repurpose those funds into what was already spent for the 191, which made perfect sense. And the third tranche, and the commissioner's using the word tranche of funds, is $10 million that are available to schools once you plan to spend the CARES Act and have spent the Supplemental Public School Response Fund. There's monies available for additional expenses to apply for the 10 million. So this goes back, the other time that the district received significant unanticipated revenue from the federal government was ERA funds. If you remember, that's 2008, 2009. That was the very beginning of my superintendency. It was called the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And when we accepted those funds, it became close to so what the town votes in March is the amount we can spend. And there's a cap there. And when we had the ERA funds, it came close to that. So under Michelle's guidance and with the board back then and me, we increased the federal project line in our budget so we could have more capacity to receive funds if they came, always offset by an expense. And so that year we like increased the budget in some view at 500,000. And I did a screencast and we talked about this quite a lot because it wasn't increased. They authorized us to spend more, but for federal projects and for federal funds, it's only if we have an offsetting expense. And we wanted to make sure that we had enough capacity to bring funds in. And so that's why we have, there's a line of federal projects in the budget, about $550,000, which is the envelope that allows us to receive this funds. Now, if we didn't have that and we were short, we'd have to go get commissioner and DRA approval to receive funds. It's still possible, but now this is just a public hearing because we do have the capacity under the voted budget in March. So I'll just quickly share the screen and just take a look at all the work that Michelle has done. So I know it's small, I'll try and blow it up. So, well, do you see a table?
Yes.
Yep. So this is, we've got computer, Chromebooks, OS management, projectors, desktops, monitors, document cameras, headsets. Vital oxide is our disinfectant. One of our favorite pop-up tubs with 500 wipes. I remember all the discussion about having wipes in our classrooms. Before school started, Michelle and I were making our little plastic bags full of wipes. Masks, face shields, library shields. I think it went a little crazy. Germs be gone. And the MERV 13 filters, remember we've talked about, it's bouncing around. Is it bouncing around for you guys too? Powder-free gloves. So she is allocated so we have all set. One of the questions was, have we been able to spend? So we have $191,000 has been spent, all set. Actually, we received the check too, right, Michelle? So we have met that standard of having at least $191,000 expended and implemented already. And then what Michelle started doing is this is the 10 million of the next iteration. And tomorrow at 11:30, we have a Zoom meeting about how to apply for that. And Michelle started all that as well. So and this is actually grown. This is just the other day. So we're all set to do 56,000, but there's more since then. And we have allocated already, we have 45,464 is our share of the CARES.
So actually, no. So that was reallocated. So there should be another page in that Google sheet because this total is on the second worksheet. Instead of me writing all those things.
Yep, there it is. Thank you, Michelle.
Because I had worked on this to reclass things through the ESSA funds, and then all of a sudden we got the $200, and I was like, okay, then I'm reclassing them out of that grant that I just reclassed them to, and I'm going to put them back in the general fund, which in the end I'll have to reclass again. And based on tomorrow's conversation, it might have to be a separate fund than the federal projects because they want it in a totally separate fund. So it'll be like another special revenue fund potentially.
So here's more the air purifiers for the nurse's office. And then we bought an anemometer. You remember that to do the testing? It's like a walk down memory lane in the fall, isn't it? About all the stuff that we've done. And here's all the masks of 50 surgical masks. So we have allocated the 46. We have ready for 191 and ready to prepare for the 10 million tranche. All ready to go. And Michelle has kept copious notes and full allocation. And that document is available for public view on our website. So there won't be a penny in this area that we won't utilize. And we're pursuing everything we possibly can.
Thanks, Steve. That was helpful. Are there any questions from the board or clarifications?
I just had one question, and maybe I just didn't see it. For all of the computers that we purchased earlier in the year, is it possible for us to put those in there somewhere?
They
They're there.
are.
That was-
So
They
some
were
of them,
somewhere in there. Okay.
and then I actually had to get direction from the state on, because we still have a whole slew of the Chromebooks that haven't come in and things. So Steve talked about that the numbers already changed for the grant application. Now it's up to like $177,000. And I just put that in yesterday for the balance of the Chromebooks. Being though, if we don't get it before December 30th, we cannot get the funds for that. So the hope would be is that they all come in for that.
But here's $63,000 in Chromebooks right here. If you can you see that? Is that too small? It's big on
Oh,
my
we can
world.
see it.
I can see it. It looks good. Thank you.
That's where that is. And so we're doing everything we possibly can to utilize all the grant funds as our fiduciary responsibility for the Hopkins School District.
Norm?
Can you only go once for the 10 million for the application, or can you continuously go, let's say, because it's first come, first serve, correct?
And remember, everything has to be in by December 30 and
No,
implemented.
no,
then
so, well, yeah, the application though has to be in by December 1st. And you only submit one app.
Okay.
And it's, yes, exactly like what Steve just said. I have a feeling that the state is going to get a way more than $10 million worth of requests. And so what will happen is it will be prorated based on what amount that they have approved to give to people. And so we would get a share of $1.
Okay. So my last question is, and I apologize, I'm doing the accounting wrong in my head. So we spent about 191,000. We're getting replenished that back from the state. Can you explain to me how the accounting works for that, for the money that's coming in to the district, how it's allocated? Do you understand the question?
Yeah, so right now the revenue is in the general fund, but soon, once everything is determined based on tomorrow's meeting, whether it can go in the federal projects or it has to be a special revenue, then everything is going to at some point come out of the general fund and get reclassed into some kind of other fund.
Okay.
And then we have to keep in the other expenses that we're going to apply for the $10 million grant until we actually get word whether we get approved or not. And then once we know, then we reclass whatever we can to that bucket. And then after that, if we have any left, then what we do is we can reclass that into the other grant that we have, the ESSER fund grant.
Okay. So last thing I want to say, Michelle, I am a controller, and I have to say you are organized. Everything that you got on that sheet, I was extremely impressed, down to the penny in every description. So amazing. That was just brilliant. Thank you.
It's easier for me because of all the reclassing.
So Steve, I have a question about,
Yeah.
so we set aside $70,000 for Chromebooks out of fund balance back in the summer. And so some of this money is going to take care of that, correct? So my question is, how does that negotiate those funds that we set aside? How does that impact the fund balance moving forwards, moving backwards?
Sure. So if we have other types so the board can transfer that funds, for example, if we have to hire more staff or more other equipment, that money's still there and the board can transfer that. Or it could go, if it's not expended this year, it could go to fund balance next year. So that was that, and there was about $40,000 for unknown expenses related to student services, if you remember that. And plus we pre-bought mat stuff. So those financial decisions by the board were really strong because that provided flexibility and insurance, if you will, against these needs. Because we didn't know, I think, what was it, Michelle, 3 or 4 weeks ago? It was right before the election that we heard about the $191,200 per child. And before that, Rob, we would have planning on using the funds that you just described. But now that gives greater flexibility to those funds if we need them as the year goes along, or it can go to fund balance.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
But I really, those decisions were very strong for the financial condition under operating under a pandemic. And it was great that we got 191 and 44, but the funds that the board put aside was very, I think, a great move too.
Other questions for Steve or Michelle? So I am going to open it up to members of the public. If there's any members of the public who either have questions or want to provide comments on the use of these funds and the acceptance of these funds. If you're watching or listening now, if you go down towards the bottom of your screen, there should be a raise your hand button that you can press, and we can unmute your line. So anybody who has comments they wish to provide?
Well, they're pondering the ERV unit, energy recovery ventilator unit at Herald is in this list. And tonight at the board meeting, there'll be an action item rescinding the action item for the maintenance trust connected to that.
And that's part of the 191, I assume.
I think that's going to be in the application, right, Michelle? That's in the application for, we think it's a pretty strong request out of the 10 million tranche. But if we don't get that, we can still move some money around, but we think it's a pretty good piece of application there.
Yes, so what I tried to do is by date of when we actually spent the items and received it. And so that's why the ERV doesn't make it in the first grouping.
Would we want to rescind? Maybe this isn't for now, this might be for later, but no one's raised their hand, so maybe I'll ask. Do we want to rescind we do, rather than see if we get the money through the application for the 10 million?
Well, what we'll do is we'll use the grant. So one way or the other, I mean, I would think.
Yeah, we can use the
unless board
44
feels that.
under the CARES grant.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Because we have until September 30. So the goal is to take it out of the pandemic related funds, because it was truly related to the pandemic.
Thank you. The still having the 46, that had slipped my mind. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
No, I don't think I was clear enough on that.
So I'm not seeing anybody raise their hand. And so I will close the public hearing. And I guess I just asked the board, there's 2 action items. I guess there's 3 action items associated with this, but 2 on the receipt of funds. Do board members feel you have enough information for a vote on those?
Yep.
All right. So I guess what I would suggest is that we adjourn the public hearing and then we come back together in 10 minutes, 12 minutes for our regular meeting. So we can grab a snack, some pizza. Norm can find us PlayStation 5s and we'll be in good shape.
Thanks,
Steve,
everybody. We'll see you in 10 minutes.
Are we using the same link?
Same link. I'm going to keep the meeting open. I'm just going to turn the recording off now, if that's okay.